Hello, and welcome back to History Bytes. Today, we're talking about the battle for Seelow Heights, one of the final battles on the Eastern Front in World War II. Let's get some background. It's April 1945, and the war is almost over in Europe. The Allies are pushing hard into Germany from the west, and Soviets from the east. The Soviets were closing on Berlin, quickly, and wanted to encircle the city and crush any remaining German forces, notably the German Ninth Army that was separated from the other forces. The Germans were still defending fiercely, however, and were ready to defend Berlin at all costs. Before the battle. On the 9th of April, Königsberg fell to Soviet forces. This freed up the 2nd Belarusian Front to move towards Berlin and relieved the 1st Belarusian Front to move towards the strategically defensible town of Seelow and its natural and man-made fortifications known as Seelow Heights. The first 2 weeks in April saw the fastest redeployment by Soviet forces of the entire war. Both troops and commanders wanted to capture Berlin. Infamous Soviet Marshal Ivan Konev shifted his forces that were further to the south to prevent reinforcements opposing the Belarusian fronts. The Soviet forces, including both Belarusian fronts and Konev's army, had over 2.5 million men, 6,250 tanks, 7,500 aircraft, 41,600 artillery guns, and 3,255 Katyushas, a weapon that terrified the Germans. Even facing only a portion of that directly, only the 1st Belarusian Front, the Germans were incredibly outnumbered, having only 587 tanks, of which not all were working, and 2,625 artillery guns. The 4th Panzer Army was opposing Ivan Konev further south, and could not reinforce. German General Gotthard Heinrich was in command, and correctly predicted where the Soviets would attack from, through Seelow Heights, and in order to overcome the huge disparity in troop numbers, he dug in and prepared a vicious defence against the Soviets, who were under overall command from Marshal Georgy Zhukov. The defences that Heinrich had built included anti-tank guns and ditches, and huge expanses of trenches and bunkers in a defensive line up to 15 miles wide, that's 24 kilometres. The battle. The Soviets opened that battle by pummelling the area with artillery and Katyusha rockets. The Germans carefully manoeuvred their forces away from the barrages to reduce their impact with great success. After the Germans flooded the fields in front of the defensive lines, the Germans held back the Soviets, causing huge casualties for the attackers. Zhukov was frustrated by his painfully slow and costly advance, having to push his reserve forces into the fighting, forces he wanted to keep back. It was Ivan Konev in the south, however, who had brought an end to the German defence, pushing from the south with permission from Stalin, forcing the Germans to fall back. The Germans, unable to stop Zhukov's dogged, determined pushes and Ivan Konev's impenetrable waves of tanks, were forced to surrender or flee. On the 18th of April 1945, both Soviet fronts continued advancing, still taking heavy losses. By nightfall, Zhukov's 1st Belarusian Front had broken through the final lines of defence and were ready to push on Berlin. Konev raced west, mopping up resistance and crushing the remaining German forces between his forces and the American ones in the west. The aftermath. From the 19th of April, the west road to Berlin lay open as all defensive lines had been overrun. From the 23rd of April, Berlin was fully encircled, and the Battle of Berlin began to draw to a close. Zhukov's success in crushing the German forces left Berlin defended by weak soldiers, meaning the Soviets captured the city in just 10 days. The Battle of Seelow Heights cost 12,000 German soldiers, and anywhere between 10,000 to 30,000 Soviet lives. We'll probably never know the true cost of life for the Soviets, as the details were never accurately recorded and preserved. I hope you enjoyed today's episode on the Battle of Seelow Heights. If you learned something new, press like and subscribe if you're new. Leave a comment on what you thought, and I'll see you next time.